discussing the history of labor struggles in the South with author, historian, practitioner, activist, organizer, thinker, Mike Goldfield. I did prepare a larger bio, so you can look at the back of the book if you have it, or you can Google it, get the longer bio. But I wanted just to welcome you all. Mike is also, with Abdul and myself, part of the political education with SWA committee. And this is a session where we're going to really dig down into the history of struggle, labor struggle in the South. I'll turn it over to Mike.
So I'm going to give sort of a short presentation, hopefully short, that's my plan. And then a lot of questions about how this applies to everybody else's organizing. And if you want to ask me historical questions or anything else, that's fine. That's fine too. So that's my plan. And I've given a bunch of talks on the book or things related to it, so I'm thinking that it's better that we have more discussion and less of my talking. So, and I can't, so James is going to click. Okay, so Southern labor is the key to understanding and changing everything in American society. People have been saying that, but why is that the case? So, what is the South? The South is an atypical part of the United States, but it's also America writ large. As Malcolm X used to say, there's no such thing. There's only up South and down South. We're down South. Okay. So this begins, as one of the speakers noted in the plenary, with the legacy of slavery and white supremacy. I'm going to go real quick through the slides. Slavery is a form of cheap labor, right? Forced labor in cotton, tobacco, sugar, and indigo. There was a lot of industrial labor, coal mines, steel, tobacco, wood, railroad construction. And the legacy of that in terms of the composition of the labor force remained in most of those industries in the South. A large percentage of coal miners, for example, were African American. Also, cheap skilled labor, sawmills, construction trades, particularly the trowel trades in the South were historically black. Even railroad engineers, skilled ship pilots in Charleston were slaves. So this was cheap labor. Okay, and cotton cotton was the main crop, and the South was the supplier of cotton to the rest of the world for a long period of time. The 12 wealthiest counties in the country were all in the cotton. I think actually South Carolina during this period was the wealthiest state in the U.S. As today, economic power equaled political power. A majority of your early presidents were slave owners. Brutality and censorship was centered in the South. Beating, mutilation, lynching, murder, not just of slaves, but anybody who opposed slavery, including northern abolitionists, came down. On the Senate floor in 1856, Southern elites cheered when a South Carolina congressman beat an elderly Massachusetts senator into unconsciousness and crippled him for life. And there are pictures of Southern ladies waving their handkerchief and cheering. People who all generally didn't like this type of behavior. Slave-controlled governments censored mail from the North if it wasn't sufficiently pro-slavery. This censorship was going strong in the 60s. In Mississippi, they refused to allow radios to play the Nina Simone song that I started with Mississippi Goddam. This censorship continues today, or it's accelerated today. We see this in terms of the purging of the Naval Academy Library, which I don't want to deal with, people have read, attacks on plantation, and the parallels to ICE officials and slave catchers who grab people without any due process are pretty clear. But none of this is to argue that the South is all bad. And there's a lot of interesting things. It's not only the birthplace of blues and jazz and lots of American literature. It turns out that there are more black African American PhDs from Southern universities than there are from any of the so-called liberal and more racially tolerant places in the North. But the disregard for human life that comes from slavery, one statistic that I have in the book, which isn't here, there were 100 times more murders of whites against whites in Georgia in the 1850s as there were in New England per capita. And people killed with whips, with axes. I mean, a lot of it wasn't with guns. So life is cheap. Today, the lowest, and I've updated these figures, the lowest level of health care in the United States is in southern states. The national average of those unprotected is 8%. In Texas, it's more than twice that. And then we look at the bottom, Massachusetts, Vermont, and Hawaii, 2-3% people uncovered. That's all probably going to change. Lowest per capita speaker. Pupil spending, and of course a lot of this has to do with the low level of labor organization in the South. Did we go? Yeah. So just a quick glance, I'm not going to go through this, but here's union density by state. Hawaii is at the top, then comes from New York. Currently southern states in the top there, and we go to the bottom, next slide. The lowest states, there are a few non-southern states in there, but South Dakota, Idaho, but South Carolina is third lowest, North Carolina is the lowest, and so on. And then there are these myths about Southern workers that they have attitudes and that they're too individualistic to organize. That's not true. There's a rich legacy of struggle and organization, some of which I try to detail in the book. We can keep going from there. So whites and blacks in many areas, and this has only become popularized occasionally, fought slave owner secession before the Civil War, engaged in guerrilla warfare against the Confederacy in Jones County, Mississippi, and lots of other places in the South. There was interracial organizing throughout the South in the late 19th century under the banner of the Knights of Labor. Textile had a lot of militancy, and I think I have a list of, you can, so the Industrial Workers of the World, which was a revolutionary syndicalist group, unionized timber workers, and timber workers include loggers and people working in sawmills throughout the South. New Orleans waterfront workers, and there's a history, of course, on all the waterfronts in the Gulf and the South Atlantic of union organization, as there still is today. The textile strikes that took place were almost exclusively in the South between 1929 and 1932, and one of the largest strike in U.S. history was the 1934 general textile strike centered in the South. And we can go on civil rights struggles in the 50s and 70s, and the interracial labor struggles, which I try to document in some industries. But also, if you want to look at, I have information on almost every state and industry during this period of the 30s and 40s. So if anybody wants, not that I know everything, but I can give you leads if I don't know it, to things in your locale, or certainly your state, if that's what you need. And coal miners were fully organized, particularly in West Virginia and Alabama. They were half African American in Alabama and about 25% African American in West Virginia, and they had lots of valiant struggles and incredible solidarity. So if you can vaguely remember the statistics that I showed you, in 1946, Alabama was 26% unionized. That's higher than every state today, with the exception perhaps of Hawaii, where it's close. So in Alabama, in some of the counties, everybody was organized. Not coal miners, steel workers, teachers. In one county, they even had all the principals in the schools organized. Coal miners set the so I got some pictures. Alabama coal miners, 1937. We can skip this. That's a more part of the analysis. So in Mississippi, there was organizing in major industries. The picture here is textile. And they tried to organize, as many of the assemblies are trying to do, wall-to-wall, which was not just one or two industries, but as the blitz that took place here tried to do in a wide variety of workplaces, all supporting each other. This is from Gadsden, Alabama, where they organized people from washerwomen to textile to various other industries. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, the atomic city where all the production for the atomic bomb had 40,000 workers, half of them female, was completely organized in 1946 to 1947. Overwhelming majorities for the unions in those cases, most of them industrial unions. And I've got some pictures. This is a sign outside Oak Ridge during the war. That people aren't supposed to say what they were doing. And they lived in trailers. This is a small section of the 5,000 trailers that workers lived in Oak Ridge.
Mike, I'm from Oak Ridge. This is my hometown right here. I wasn't expecting you to start talking about this. It just caught me off guard.
But so you're familiar with this stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was a major organized, and one of the few successful campaigns that Operation Dixie has, which I talk about a lot in the book. Go ahead. And here, some of the female workforce, and they're all sitting at monitors, monitoring atomic material. This is tobacco workers in 1947, I believe, in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where they had fully organized Reynolds Tobacco Company. And International Harvester, 1947, in, I don't know whether that was from Louisville or Memphis. United Packing House Workers organized all the little and some of the big places in Texas. There was a fourth, I don't know why they called them packing houses. They were slaughterhouses where the animals were. So the industrial makeup of the South has changed a lot since then. And people here are probably at least as familiar as I am. The Mercedes plant, we've all seen pictures of that. So this is Spartanburg, also a center, the largest Mercedes BMW plant in the world. These are the figures, courtesy of Abdullah. I got from your link. Okay, and this is a big installation, 11,000 workers in a plant. It's pretty large. And I've got, this is a picture. And probably the people who are local here, if you want to see it, could take you to the plant. You won't get that nice aerial view. Okay, this is from at the Amazon campaign in Alabama. So the industry, most of the industrial mix has changed. Tennessee, Kentucky, Mississippi behind that.
Hey, I'm in that picture. And that's not the Chattanooga teachers, that's the Guilford County Association of Educators standing in solidarity. I'm the fellow up front. We're all my We're holding that.
It was a great time.
Yeah, so I've had these pictures sent to me, and I don't know as much detail as you obviously do about the picture. So, okay, so in 2023, there was more organizing in Texas than any place else, surprisingly. A red state. Union membership in the private sector increased by 191,000. And there have been a lot of other places that were hardly publicized. Catfish workers in Mississippi unionized a while back. And in the Toyota plant where the UAW failed, the construction workers had big demonstrations and forced the company to accept only unionized construction labor to build the plant and only unionized construction labor to do maintenance in the plant. You can skip that one. And there's been a lot of teacher technology, including, there's a picture from West Virginia teachers, Oklahoma, which we consider part of the South, 3,000 teachers occupied the State House and forced the levy. So that now comes, I don't know how I got through that. But so the key question is, how do you build on this tradition, and how do you figure out what you should be doing in your own locale? So the first thing you want to look at is the industrial and employment composition at the state and local level. You can go to the biggest workouts, what's the history of workplaces, history of labor struggles, civil rights struggles, grievances, and the as everybody knows, grievances can change overnight. I mean, sometimes they're long-standing grievances, and sometimes they're long. So I worked at this international harvester plant, and every year we tried to organize the office workers, and they vote, when there were elections, they vote 40% for elections for the union. Then one contract where the chain got a big increase in medical benefits and a bunch of other things. They refused to give the same benefits to the office workers, and within a couple of weeks they voted 90% for the union. And the union had been trying to organize these office workers for 20 years unsuccessfully. So one pays attention to these things. and Spartansburg. So I'm not real good at the PowerPoint. I think I should pull it up. James here is real good at it. So Spartanburg, just interestingly, and South Carolina has an interesting, during Reconstruction, the Union Leagues, which were supporters of the Republican Party, and voting in some county, all black counties in South Carolina was 100%. And we look at, you know, if 55% people vote in the presidential election today, it's considered 60% considered a big deal. And these people defended their meetings with arms. The unions, Charleston had a long history of unionization of longshore people. During Reconstruction, they passed progressive legislation, minimum wages. They had free universal education. Women were given equal rights in property. So even in the 60s, which I remember, women could not, married women could not get a mortgage without being co-signed with their husband, and they couldn't get credit cards on their own. I mean, so all these things in South Carolina were passed by, and W.E.B. Du Bois in Black Reconstruction has a chapter on South Carolina, and he talks about the composition. Both the whites and blacks had no money. He went through all the tax things, and only a few people had enough property to pay any taxes. And so it was a working class legislature for a number of years that passed all this, and they had, you could flip forward, I think I have it all. Any case, that's probably enough. So, the question I want to put, I think feel free to ask me questions, but I'd be interested in us sharing how you would go about organizing, doing research and getting information where you are to help your organizer. But the historical things are both interesting, they give lessons, but they also show people that there are prior periods when a lot of organization did take place. And South Carolina certainly has that history. So.
I guess I probably should kind of so this is open up to having a conversation with Mike and, you know, collective consciousness or collective intelligence in the room as well, to have a conversation about what you just saw and also what can be contributed to us understanding, you know, the history of labor struggles, but more importantly, how can we learn from those particular moments and carry those ideas in this moment and into the future. So.